Well, good evening, everybody. Alan Slaughterzinski for the Brevard Sports Network. And we conclude our summer series of interviews tonight. High school football starts this week, volleyball's in full swing. And I can't think of a better way and a better individual to end our summer series of interviews with tonight than the gentleman we have in studio. He is a Florida High School Athletic Association Hall of Famer, and he has been an unbelievable and fantastic administrator here in Brevard County. Retired now, so we have a lot to talk about. Please help me welcome here tonight. I'm honored to have him, Mr. Gary Shiffrin. And Gary, first of all, welcome and thank you for coming in studio. I really, really appreciate having you here. So I'm just going to start off by saying I told Caleb the other day that you'd be here in the Merritt Island outfit. Where is it? I love it.
Well, when I first got to Merritt Island, I was looking for something that was kind of a loud splash. I knew I had a lot of things that I would be doing because that's the kind of person I was. And so I went online and I said, give me something that's black and gold. And the next thing I knew, I was sent this beautiful black and gold zoot suit. And I wore it for special occasions, homecoming and things like that. But right now, it is in a locked locker at Merritt Island in a time capsule.
Wow.
And so I don't know when they're going to reopen it again, but that's where it's at. So,
Gary, obviously we're going to get into, the meat and potatoes of your career. But, when administrators, educators say that they truly love working with kids, when I hear that from you, and I've heard that from you and seen that written from you over the years, I know it's heartfelt, and I know, and I know all of them mean it when they say it, but I know it really comes from deep down with, inside of you. What do you think made you such an effective administrator and educator for so many years?
Well, thank you for saying those kind words, Alan. I always said that when I was in particular going to become a principal and did become a principal, that I wanted to be a part of the kids.
Right.
I wanted to do things with them. And I always tried to get all of my administrators to do the same thing. When it came to Spirit Week, for example, we dressed up every single day in whatever the theme is. I participated in the school plays. I was in the Titanic. I was in the Christmas Carol. So I felt that the best thing that I could do was be out there with them and to show them that I supported them. And it wasn't just the students, it was the teachers as well and the parents and the community. You have to make sure that everybody is on the same page, that everybody understands the importance of each other.
Yeah.
And that I valued what they did. I went to like student meetings and I asked, tell me what's going on, what can we do to make it better, what can we do, and so they knew that I was interested in them, and I felt that was always the greatest thing in regards to my being a leader. Was the relationships that I made.
When you go on, and we were just talking about this prior to hitting the go button here, you go into your FHSAA Hall of Fame induction, and it says, after a failed eye exam sidetracked you from your ultimate goal of attending the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. Talk a little bit about that and how God has a plan for us, and that didn't, that door didn't open, but plenty more did. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, again, I was an Army brat. My dad was in the Army. I lived with G.I. Joe for all of my upbringing. And so it was natural then that what I wanted to do was to go and follow in his footsteps and go into the Army.
Right.
But unfortunately, when I was born, I was given a bad eye.
Mm-hmm.
And so, even though I felt like I had a lot that I could contribute, you still had to pass the physical. And I can still remember when I took the eye exam for West Point, the eye doctor said, well, we're not so much worried about what you'll do to the enemy. We're more worried about what you'll do to your fellow soldiers if you were
Understandable.
If you were to lose your glasses and
Sure.
couldn't see. And so I understood, but at the same time I didn't give up.
Right.
Because then I applied to the Citadel, I applied to VMI, I applied to
kept on going.
And they all had the same the same physicals. So at that point, I knew I had to decide on another way to make a difference. And what better way to make a difference than be an educator? And so I went to Springfield College in Massachusetts, and I became a history teacher, a social studies teacher.
What was your favorite part of history to teach at that time?
Well, when I taught at Melbourne High School back in the 70s, one of the classes that I taught was called POT.
Okay.
And it stood for Problems of Today.
Right.
But I think that a lot of the kids kind of thought, hey, well,
let's take this course, right?
This will be a cool course. And even though they quickly found out that it wasn't what they might have thought it was a great course, because we indeed did talk about what was going on in the world and in our government and in our community, and so it was a wonderful thing to teach.
We still use that pot as a catchphrase on Brevard Sports Network, and it's points off turnovers for us. So
I understand.
We always get the eyes perk up when we see there's pot. Can they do points off turnovers? And I know people at home are laughing about that. We're here with Hall of Famer Gary Shiffrin, and so I guess my question is as an administrator and educator, how did all of this then involve sports?
Well, again, like I said, as a kid, I was one of those kids that in the basement, we don't have basements in Florida, but where I was most of the time, if it was baseball, if it was football season, I was throwing a football. If it was basketball, I was dribbling on a basketball. But I just always got involved in whatever sport it was. I wasn't a great athlete, by any means, but I participated, so even in high school, I played soccer, I swam, I played golf. So I've always been involved with athletics, and so I knew that when I became an educator that being involved in athletics was going to be an important part. I just never envisioned that would be as important as it became.
Yes.
Because indeed I was given many opportunities to do so many other things than just coach, which was a wonderful thing. And you talk about making a difference, our coaches make a difference all the time.
Yeah.
So that's where I got. And then my good friend David St. John, he was one of the first commissioners, and we taught together at Mel High. And he had asked me to become an officer, and so of course I would never turn Dave down for anything.
Right.
But it was something again that I'd like to have done, and I did. And and unexpectedly in 1991 he passed away.
Yeah.
And so I became the commissioner. The athletic directors voted me in to be the new commissioner, and I stayed commissioner for 23 years.
I want to go back to teaching because you have taught. Obviously we see so much change in this country all the time, and you were a teacher back in the 70s. You've been teaching through and an administrator through some of the hardest times in our country's history. How have you seen it? I guess my question is how, as a teacher, how do you adapt through all of those periods?
Well, again, in the beginning, in the 70s, a lot of it had to do with, racial issues and things like that. And
the war.
And you got the Vietnam War.
Right.
And so the one thing that you had to do, and I understood this, is that, you had to be objective.
Mm-hmm.
You had to not ever take sides. You had to present both sides of the issue, let the kids, talk about it and do it. But yeah,
it's tough.
It was tough, and I've said that I'm not sure I could teach today, only because it really is so traumatic, and there's a lot of things going on, and but at the same time, you want our kids to be educated. You want them to know what's going on in the world. And so you take that, as one of your objectives and one of your goals, and you go through it.
Gary, I always tell our student athletes, neutrality is a hard thing. If you believe in something, then stand up for it. I always tell them that. I think they're, to be able to be a student athlete and have a voice and have an opinion is an important thing. Here with Gary Shiffrin. Gary, let's talk about obviously. beginning with the Cape Coast Conference, and then you took that role over in '91 as commissioner. How have you seen the Cape Coast Conference evolve over all these years? You said it began in 1968. How has it evolved?
Well, it's evolved in a lot of ways, and there's been a lot of issues that we have had to adjust and we've had to change. I give one example I'll tell you is that when I was at Mel High, even before
Right.
The conference, girls athletics was not with FHSAA. They were called GAA, which was Girls Athletic Association.
Oh, really?
So it was strictly a all male
Wow.
thing in Florida. But then in 1973 or 74, they finally decided that it was important to bring the girls into Florida High School Athletic Association, and so they did. And I actually became the first interscholastic volleyball coach
Wow.
for Mel High.
Okay.
The first year that the girls got into it. But over the years, again, we've dealt with gender. I mean equity issues. For a long time, based on even
Absolutely.
what I just said about volleyball. The guys had all of the best equipment. They had the best locker room.
Yep.
They had, everything else, and then the girls were not involved. And I can remember even at Merritt Island when the lawsuit took place where you had the baseball field, and then you had, the softball field was eventually built, but it wasn't there for a long time.
Right.
Well, then they even got into it because the stands in the baseball field were much better than the stands in the softball field, and so it became a big lawsuit.
Right.
And then, unfortunately, it was decided that it needs to be equal. If you're going to do this,
Absolutely.
if you're going to do this right, then you need to make sure that boys and girls are treated the same.
Yeah.
And so, at least over the years, we've seen where that has been accomplished.
Gary, the one thing that I knew the reason I knew this interview had to happen is because the biggest issue that faces sports today, not just here in the state of Florida, but even so at a college level, is something that the FHSAA list is arguably your greatest accomplishment, which is the transfer policy that prevented students from transferring from one public school to another without giving up a full year of eligibility. If only, Gary, we could do that again, we may not have the issues we have. I know this has to drive you crazy because it drives me crazy. Talk a little bit about that policy, how you were able to get that done, and what you're seeing now.
Yeah, it was beginning to get out of hand in regards to students transferring from one school to another and basically playing for more than one school. And then involved with that was illegal recruiting.
Yeah.
So it got bad. And I was fortunate to have had the opportunity to sit down with Dr. Richard DePatri just prior to him becoming our superintendent.
Okay.
And I presented to him this idea that I had in regards to if we want to get a grasp on all of this moving around and everything else, that I wanted him and our school board to consider this transfer policy. And you basically said it. And that was, if you're going to transfer from one school to the next, you're going to have to sit out 365 days. And we even had a committee that, looked at all the transfers
Sure.
and made decisions and things like that. And within a few years, the numbers went way down.
Yeah.
I mean, like you said,
Yeah.
it solved
Yes, it did.
solved the problem. But who would have ever thought that we would be in the situation we are today?
How did that happen? For those that don't know, how did we get to this position?
Well, for a number of years ago, the state legislature threatened to take over FHSAA. And that had to do with one of the legislators' children who wanted to transfer to another school and play sports and was told that you couldn't do it. So he got all upset, and he went on this big old mission to, make this political, and that's what happened. And it's just taken on a whole different personality now, though, where basically kids can play in 4 different schools during their 4 years and beyond.
We've seen it.
Of course we have. Now, aside from that, now we're even paying kids to play in high school.
I want to ask you about that because it's coming, Gary.
It is.
30 states have name, image, and likeness written into law for high school student athletes. And I understand that paperwork is either in Tallahassee or on its way for Florida. And, Gary, I just cannot fathom what the world's going to look like when that happens in this state.
Well, again, it's amazing that educated, smart people who are supposedly our leaders would allow this to happen. I mean, it's bad enough that they're paying college athletes. We never did.
No.
Athletics, but in particular, high school athletics was like the purest form of sportsmanship. But now it's coming down to, like colleges, you don't even have to recruit hard if you have a lot of money. You look at it like Arch Manning, for example, at Texas now. I mean, he's going to be paid millions to play, football. That's not what this was all about.
No.
That's why we called them professionals.
Right.
That's when they started to get paid for their talents. But now we're paying amateurs. We're going to be paying high school students.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to think that sometime down the road, the light will go off and people will realize, what have we done?
Yeah.
But it's not
Not
gonna
now.
happen.
Yeah.
We still have to enjoy athletics.
No, you're right. And now listen, I mean this sincerely because, when I first broke in here in Brevard County 9-10 years ago, the one thing that my mentors, Steve Wilson and Orville Susong, always told me was never lose sight of the fact, first of all, never criticize these kids for what they're doing. They're doing it truly for the love of the game. Do you see a day and time coming in the future where high school students are no longer doing it for the love of the game and doing it for the money? And are we upon that time?
Alan, unfortunately, I have to say we are.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just everything is going that way.
Yep.
And then you have, parents who, because I've always felt that kids should participate in more than one sport.
Yes.
But now you've got parents who, have this feeling my kid's an all-star, so, they're going to get a scholarship and they're going to go on and participate in the pros. And now, you're going to pay these athletes, and then it really makes it even worse because, they're going to be tied to that sport that they're being paid for.
Yep.
So I'm always a positive person.
Yeah, me too.
I'm always upbeat. But in this regard, it's
hard.
It's very complicated and it's very hard.
It is extremely, extremely hard. We're here with Gary Shiffrin, a 42-year career as an administrator and a difference maker and a Hall of Famer here in Brevard County. So you go from Melbourne to, where do you go after Melbourne?
Well, I taught in Melbourne for 7 years, and then I got this opportunity to go into administration. I got my master's from Rollins, and I knew that, to raise my family, I felt that it might be better to, go where, again, the money is.
Right.
Even though I love, I look back on my career, and my 7 years at Mel High were unbelievable. It was truly the difference maker. But I went and became a dean at Stone. I stayed there for 1 year. Then I went to Cocoa Beach, and I worked with Hank Smith, who to me was a legend. He was my true mentor. I learned everything about what it took to be a principal. and to be a leader. I stayed there for 4 years, and I got transferred to Rockledge High, and I was there for 6. And then from Rockledge, I went to Jefferson, which, it was the first really big time that I spent at a middle school, and I learned about all the nuances of middle school kids, which are much different than high school kids. But then I became the principal there and spent 10 years as principal at Jefferson. And then, and one other reason I stayed there was because my own kids were in school and high school, and I wanted to be able to, watch them. If I went to the high school, I knew that wasn't going to happen.
Right.
Well, then they graduated, and so in 2003, the opportunity came up, and I applied, and I was accepted to be the new head Mustang. So it was a good thing.
What sports did you coach?
What sports? Okay, so I coached cross country.
Okay.
Which was interesting because I never had coached cross country. I just came to Florida, and so I read some books on cross country, and so I was a runner. I mean, I ran.
Right.
So I started running with these kids, and I realized, this isn't good. I mean, the books I read were from people from the north, and they didn't mention anything about it being 95 degrees.
Right.
And
Doug Butler talks about that a lot.
So I spent two days doing my running with them. I said, nah, it's not going to work.
Right.
So then I got on my bike with them, and I'm biking. And that's not going to work either. So then I started with my air-conditioned car, and I could do that, and that was fine. But,
right up Caleb's alley there.
but it's not. It's again. But fortunately, I was lucky after that to get involved in some other sports, and so. Like I said, I was the first interscholastic volleyball coach with the girls. I coached football even one year, the receivers.
Okay.
But then I also was the golf coach for 5 years.
You did it all.
I was an athletic junkie.
You just seemed to love it.
I did.
Yeah.
No matter what I did, and I was still single at the time, so I could devote my whole life to all that. And
that's a key.
It is.
Yeah, no, you're right. I could believe me. You come in and the running joke in the community is, welcome to the beautiful BREVARD Sports Network studios. But everybody knows it's my house, and obviously, no woman is ever going to put up with walking through a front door and seeing all of this sports memorabilia. So I'm single, so I get that aspect of it.
This is a wonderful thing.
Thank you. Here with Gary Shiffrin. And so let me ask you about, listen, you coach administrator over there at Merritt Island with some pretty phenomenal people. Talk about some of the people you had the opportunity to work with at Merritt Island.
Well, again, when I first came there, Paul Friel, he was the head football coach at Merritt Island, and he did a great job.
Yeah.
Then he got another opportunity, and so I went to Jeff McClain. And he'd always said, I'd like to be considered for the job and all that. And so when I said, okay, well, here's your time's up, he decided no, he wasn't ready for it. So then Lance, he came in and he did a good job. Well, then he left, and then finally
Lance Jenkins?
Yeah. Then I finally got Jeff to agree to do it, and he did a super job.
I've been trying to get Jeff in here for all summer. He's coming.
Yeah,
he's coming.
He will. He's a good man. But even the coaching staff. I mean, you look at Angie Patrick. As far as what she did with state championships, volleyball teams. I used to follow them everywhere. And then you got.
But didn't you hire Connie Denenberg?
No.
Okay.
No, I did hire Angie Patrick.
Angie Patrick. Okay.
Exactly.
I got you.
Yeah.
Okay.
But then you had Scooty, with soccer, and he had state championships.
Scooty Carey.
So Merritt Island has had, really good coaches, and they still have a great staff. So
Angie, one of the best. And then, I think the beauty of Merritt Island is you look, for example, at Tyler Murray, who's their football coach now, and he's a 2009 graduate. So you can, that island pride, and you continue to bring back those that played and went to school there. So that says something about a school when people want to come back home to work for the program that they graduated from. Here with Gary Shiffrin. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the Cape Coast Conference as it is now, because I know you still very much, your opinions are extremely. First of all, are you still involved in any way in anything?
Not really, not as far as the Cape Coast Conference. I am the executive director of the Brevard Association of School Administrators.
Okay.
So I'm still involved with school stuff.
Right.
I represent all the school administrators and the head secretaries and cafeteria, and so I'm involved from that perspective. But as far as athletics is concerned, the year before I retired in 2013, I turned it over to Jeremy Solomon, and he became the commissioner. Then, of course, it got changed tremendously.
Who's the commissioner now?
Kevin. You got me.
That's
on.
all right.
He was a wrestling coach for many years.
Kevin Robinson.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank
Kevin.
you.
Yes, Kevin Robinson, our new top county athletic director.
Exactly.
So it makes sense that he's the commissioner of the Cape Coast Conference. Now, let me ask you this. I've often said some controversial things about the Cape Coast Conference over the past couple of years. I love the Cape Coast Conference. I think it's a wonderful idea. But are we past the time when these schools should have to play? Like, for example, the Palm Bay girls basketball team last year required to play those number of games against the Cape Coast Conference. And you're getting games, Gary, that are 80-20. I still want to see a required number of games. How should we work this? Should we lessen those number of games now? And then football. Why isn't how can we tie football into the Cape Coast Conference?
Well, again, we tied it into awarding plaques to district winners, and that's how you were able to do it. And you bring up a good point. We have such a diversity of schools, and you've got the schools that are the powerhouses,
right?
And then, unfortunately, a lot of the others, it just is not. It's not quite there
because of the transfers. But go ahead.
Well, and there's a lot to that.
Yeah.
The rich get richer,
Yep.
and see, and that's why going back to that transfer thing, I'm old school.
Me too.
And my feeling always was, wherever you live, that's who you play for.
Exactly.
We don't move. You don't go there. And I can still remember Chuck Goldfarb was really upset with me because of my doing that. And and his philosophy was, well, all the kids should have the right to play for whoever they want to play for. But I had a difference.
Chuck and I'll disagree on that one. I'm with you in that corner for sure.
And I just have a difference of opinion. So. So it would be hard to come up with like a Cape Coast Conference winner.
It will.
So if you do it by district, at least
right.
those people are playing teams of similar talent and size. So you could do something like that.
I do like I will tell you, in volleyball and basketball and baseball and softball, I love the fact that we always get that extra game and those crossover games, those Cape Coast Conference championship games,
right.
And those crossover games. In fact, over the last couple of years, those Cape Coast Conference championship games in a lot of those sports have been the best games of the entire season. So,
sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
We got great talent in the conference. I mean,
yeah.
I've always felt that it was the best conference in the state of Florida.
I love it,
and I wasn't saying that because of my association
right.
with it. It's just and one thing I never got talking about is when you think about the great athletes that have gone, that have played for schools in Brevard County.
Right.
I can mention, for example, at Astronaut High School, Chris Collins.
Right.
All-Pro Wilbur Marshall, and Merritt Island, Will Perdue.
Right, yeah.
Who wears 4 world championship rings. No matter what school, there's always, we've always had great athletes that have shined. I was watching Billy Horschel in the golf tournament this weekend.
Yes.
He was a Bayside Bear.
Yes, he was.
So we have that connection, but it takes those coaches, their talents, in order to make these athletes who they are.
What if somebody said to you, Gary, the floor is yours, and you can make this change and that change, aside from the transfers, which we know we would obviously change that. Is there anything today you would change, and how would you do it?
Well, we've talked quite a bit about it already. Somehow I would try to get it back to the way it used to be, only from the standpoint of not having athletes feel that they deserve to be paid, for
Right.
example.
Yeah, there you go.
I just have a real hard feeling about that, and I just don't see it going in any good direction, even amongst the players on their own team. You know, if the quarterback is being paid, I don't know, $100,000.
It's going to cause a problem.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Who were some of the people throughout your 42 years, and you've mentioned a couple of them, but who were some of the go-to people in your life and career that that helped you, Gary?
Well, again, I have to go back to Hank Smith. You know, he died at such a young age, and it was very unfortunate, but the years I spent with him, he showed me everything I needed to know about what it took to be a great principal. And I'll give you one example. I remember it was like my first year at Cocoa Beach, and it was Spirit Week, and I got out of my car, and he got out of his car together, and I go to my office, do some things, and so then I go out to the Commons, and you got these kids that are dressed up in all of these different costumes and stuff like that. But then I see this commotion over there towards the end of the Commons, and a lot of kids around. I thought, oh, this isn't good. And so I walk down there, and who is in the middle of all these kids but Hank Smith dressed up as a Neanderthal man. And, you know, he had the wig.
That's wild.
And so, but see, the kids love that. You know, they really did. And so that's where I learned that that's some of the stuff that you do. But, you know, there are people along the way, you know, that certainly had a lot of influence. You know, I think in the athletic world, you know, as far as athletic directors, Charlie Shack was one of the people that he was my to-go-to person as far as the ADs. But then there were so many others that Benita Holland, you know, Dan Diesel.
Yeah,
I mean,
the mayor.
Yeah, the mayor. So a lot of good people that you always could depend on.
I want to get your thoughts on the coaching in the county because obviously, you know, we enter. First of all, there are the longest tenured football coach is Wayne Younger at Rockledge, and that's now Dan Burke has come back to the sidelines this year, so it'll be his 24th year. But if you leave Coach Burke out of it, the longest tenured football coach would be Wayne Younger at 9 years. And then if you throw Wayne Younger out of it, we got two coaches at 6, and everybody else is 1 and 2. Obviously, pay is an issue. Thoughts on that?
Well, aside from pay, the pressure of being a coach is really challenging. I mean, you know, even though, you know, I would hope that principals would never choose that if you're not winning that, you know, you have to be fired or you have to go someplace else.
I hope not.
That's not what we're in it for. As long as they're showing kids the good things in regards to sportsmanship and athletics, then that's important. But yeah, I mean, you know, when coaches up in Georgia, just to the north of us, are getting paid 6 figures to coach, and our coaches are getting what $3,000-$4,000, that's hard to compete against, and it's hard to explain as well. You know, Florida is one of the, when you look at Florida, Texas, California. You know, we've got the biggest athletic programs in the country. Yeah. And yet little Georgia that doesn't have that, they pay their coaches phenomenally. Yeah. So that's a big deal.
It's hard. You're right.
And a lot of them, you know, they go to coach and then they go into administration. And of course, once you go into administration, then you find that, you know, you can't really coach.
It's crazy. What ring you got on there?
This is my Florida High School athletics.
There you go. Fantastic. We'll make sure we get a picture of that. Well, Gary, as we get, this has been great. I can't believe we've been going for almost 40 minutes already. Gary, as we get set to wrap up and you look back on your 42 years and even longer, Gary, I mean, you're still involved. What are some of the, you know, and you sit back in the chair at night and you're maybe watching TV and you think about your career. What are a couple of memories that you have that really stick out to you? What are some of the fondest memories you have?
Well, again, you're right. I've had so many, and I've been so fortunate having, again, my teaching career at Mel High, and what a great opportunity that was, and being able to coach and to do all those things that I did. And I even, I sponsored the student government. I sponsored the Key Club. I did all that stuff. But then, once I got into administration, again, it was the relationships that I developed, not with just the kids, but the teachers. Athletically, I think back, at the first soccer state championship. And it was like, I was on the sidelines with the team and everything else, and it was on penalty kicks.
Yeah.
And we won it, and I can still remember the jubilation. There was something about winning a state championship.
Special, isn't it?
Right. And I always told the teams that we sent off to go play that it's all about the ring. It's all about about winning the ring. And a number of them were able to do it. But I would not, and then, obviously I got being inducted into those Hall of Fames was, it's not anything that you really think about. I certainly did not think that, eventually I would be going into a Hall of Fame. But when it happened, it was like, you got to be kidding. I mean, that was really cool. In fact, I'm the guest speaker at the Mid-Coast Officials Association.
I'll be emceeing that. Yes, sir.
So I'm able to get up and talk a little bit to them, and
that'll be fun.
Yeah,
that'll be good.
very much so.
They do a terrific job with that. Steve Muzzy is terrific.
Yep.
And I think the other thing too, I was in doing my research and making sure that I didn't miss anything. I came across an article at Space Coast Daily, and I think this is the perfect time to talk. To wrap up with this, we once again are upon us as a new school year. And you always said that it's an opportunity for a fresh start. To whatever happened last year, now's your chance to do it again.
Yep.
And I think that for those of you out there, this is a man here. Read up on this man. I'm telling you, he's done a lot for this county. He's done a lot for the schools. Both the ones that he's worked in and the ones he hasn't worked in as well. And it's been an honor to have him here today. There aren't a lot of non-coaches, players. And when I say non-coaches, I mean, like, if you look in the FHSAA Hall of Fame, if a coach goes in, it's a coach like a Dan Burke, right? But Gary is in as an administrator. And if you're in the FHSAA Hall of Fame as an administrator, you've done a lot of special things in your career. And this gentleman here, like here at the bottom, he assisted in beginning the Breakfast of Champions program, which was absolutely phenomenal.
Yep.
I was blessed to be a part of that for a couple of years. That was just great. The FHSAA's representative assembly for 2 years. So seeing this and talking about the FHSAA, looking at this, looking at them now, how do you feel about what's going on up in Gainesville right now? What do you think about the FHSAA right now?
Well, when it was announced that the state was thinking about taking it over, I really had some real harsh words in that regard. And at the time, I was the commissioner, and I sent my letters to, the legislators and, Dr. Stewart, who was the thing. But right now, I got to hope that the leadership of the FHSAA is strong enough to withstand anything that is politically being decided that would be detrimental to our athletic programs.
I agree.
And our students and our coaches. So there's a little worry,
Me too.
involved in that. But at the same time, athletics is not going to die.
No.
They will still play the game. That rhetoric will continue to take place, but we'll still play the games. We'll still have winners, and we'll still have athletes who will know that what they're doing is the right thing.
I like that. And I'm just going to finish up on that thought by saying that I hope the FHSAA has the right representation in Tallahassee when the time comes. I really do. And that's my biggest fear, that they won't. But, Gary, this has been truly an honor.
Before I
Yeah.
leave, I want to thank you for everything that you've done.
Well, thank you. That means a lot.
I remember when I first got involved, prep athletics never really got a lot of notoriety. It wasn't until Barbara Kaywood,
she's the reason for this.
Right. She came on board and she finally focused on our athletes and our programs. But then people like you and Steve and Orville have done an unbelievable job. And the exposure that our athletes and coaches now get is, priceless.
Yeah, Barbara knows how important she was to my thought process behind what needed to happen here. And, of course, I got a whole wall of Steve and Orville up there. I will never forget what Steve Wilson and Orville Susong have done for me, and they know it as well. It's been a real honor to have this gentleman in the studio. Of course, I want to thank Caleb because he got it. We were running way behind today, and Caleb got it all ready in a flash. So for Gary Shiffrin, I'm Alan Slaughter-Zinski. The final summer series of interviews here on the Brevard Sports Network. We're ready. Fall sports is here. Have a great night, everybody.